Sure. So I'm Paul Turner. So I'm Paul Turner from Cloudian. So we do a scale-out storage platform for really the big data challenge that you saw today. I think what Ben called the OMG data or the WTF data. I thought he had it described really well. That's where we play. Why do we do it? I mean, you heard Bryce earlier. If we can harness this data, if we can build the scale-out storage platforms that can really support all your data and be able to store all that genomics data, we can build new services, we can build new technology, we can deliver better value. That's what IT is about. IT is about changing the world. We have to be able to store that data efficiently. At Cloudian, our role is to store that data very efficiently using commodity Intel-based servers.
Thanks, Paul. Please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bill Norton. I serve as the Vice President of Research for Console. And prior to that, I was a co-founder of a company called Equinix, a very large-scale data center. And prior to that, I worked on the core of the internet, which was called the NSFNet. And as part of that role, I helped create an organization called NANOG, the North American Network Operators Group, which is the operators forum for the North American internet. Today we're here because we believe that the internet has done a fantastic job as a best effort service, but as we migrate more towards the cloud, more towards depending on mission critical services across the net, we believe that the internet may not be good enough for those mission critical services. So we have developed with our SaaS partners a large scale global ecosystem for directly connecting to mission critical services.
Thank you, Bill. Glenn?
Hi, everybody. I'm Glenn Russo with Zayo Group. We're a fiber optics provider based out of Boulder, Colorado. We operate across the US and Western Europe. We focus on bandwidth infrastructure, which is the connectivity part, data centers, fiber, and managed services to create things like the internet and private networks that Bill just talked about.
Thanks, Glenn. Duncan?
Great. I'm Duncan Puller from Ciena, and at Ciena we provide the infrastructure that connects together the data centers and the clouds and the networks globally. And we're a partner to Scale Matrix and Zayo and the others at the table here, and we look forward to the conversation.
As a side note to Duncan's piece, you all have seen the technology fair upstairs. Please don't miss the Ciena Innovation Lab, which is parked outside. If you didn't have a chance to look at it when you were coming in, definitely take some time to look at it on your way out. It's a fantastic tool and a great way to push some of their new technology. Building on the event theme that we've got, we know that the explosion of data and the sheer number of new connected devices being introduced on a daily basis has inevitably created new challenges for both IT organizations and businesses as a whole. What in your guys' opinions are some of the challenges you see occurring, and what advice might you offer to the audience on how to address some of these new challenges caused by all the data explosion?
So maybe I'll start into it, given that we do come from a storage background. The biggest is cost. We've got to drive cost out of the infrastructure, or forget it. We will not be able to store the petabytes, the zettabytes of data. And to drive cost out of the infrastructure, we've got to look at different kind of platforms. I think Eric was up earlier on, and Eric was talking about the new third platform. You're talking about software-defined infrastructures. That's where the world is going to. By bringing it down to commodity servers, by running storage platforms on those commodity servers, we can take the cost out of it. We can actually bring better availability, better scalability, but most importantly, by bringing down the cost, we're changing the dynamic in terms of our ability to store all data, not just some data.
You know, we talked about the big data challenges of moving this data around. You know, as a fiber optic provider, I say bring it. Yeah, it's good news for our business, but I would also say that, you know, to your point about creating that connectivity, I think we're seeing a movement towards infrastructure where people are looking at sustainable long-term network infrastructure that's scalable with their business, that we can innovate with technology like Ciena brings to the table. But there is some backhoe and plow work to be done to get that infrastructure in place. But at that point, innovation can take over, and I think the bandwidth is unlimited.
I guess I would say essentially the same thing that we heard earlier on about the growth in big data. I like that big data, enormous data, gargantuan big data, all those. That was great. We believe that that's one of the directions that is happening right now in the industry. But again, one of the issues is the internet is under attack. Around 50 million attacks across the commodity internet today happened in just the first quarter of 2015. The denial of service attacks that are routine across the internet are scaling up into the 300 to 400 gigabits per second sustained, not just for 5 minutes, but for days on end. This is a significant problem, and it doesn't just impact the target of the attack. Any of us that are sharing those same pipes across the commodity internet will see our traffic suffer the same fate: greater latency, greater queuing delay, greater packet loss. And for that reason, we put in place a independent, separate ecosystem of direct connections for our customers. One of the things I want to share with this audience is I've been working on a white paper. I'd be glad to share this with any of you guys. I spend time with the SaaS companies and enterprises asking them, when does it make sense to go over the internet, and when does it make sense to go direct? And what I have is about, I'd say 60 or so walkthroughs of this white paper where folks contributed data points. Interesting punchline, in some cases, going direct actually costs less money, even while at the same time it's more secure, better performance, more reliability, and all that kind of stuff. So if you'd like to see a copy of the paper, I'd love to share it with you and get your feedback, maybe get some more data points into the paper.
So I'll share a slightly different perspective. I have 3 teenage daughters, and they have iPhones and iPads and laptops, and they don't talk on their phones, they text, and they use Snapchat and Twitter and Instagram and all these different community-based social media means to communicate with one another. But without realizing it, what they're doing is they're creating tons and tons of data. So now instead of relying on movie studios to create content that we stream or we download and watch, we're actually creating tons of user-created content that's then shared across the networks and within the data centers and around the world. And so the world is changing in a dramatic way right now. But what's really interesting to me is the growth of data and the growth of traffic on the networks and within the data centers is growing at an ever-increasing rate because of folks like my teenage daughters who are creating all this stuff and sharing it with all their friends, right? So we have a scale problem that we've never seen before. I mean, I had the good fortune of working at UNet back in the mid-90s and having to deal with scale associated with building a global network. And today we're dealing with the same thing, but on steroids, right? Because now we have not just network operators who are designing interconnections with other network operators. We have users, uneducated users with smartphones and handheld devices that are adding data and content to this infrastructure that is being overburdened today. So it's a really interesting time in the market.
So there's challenges and changes that are occurring. Let's look at it from a slightly different model. As IT is trending towards this more as a service model, right? Where our data is located and how we access it is becoming in some cases more complex. How do we see this as a service model changing the way we're conducting ourselves in IT today?
Yeah, I guess from continuing on the network theme, I guess one of the key questions is when that data goes from your basement to in your office building to down the street to somewhere out there in the world where you're not even sure exactly where it is, calls for very different structures. And the comments that Bill was making, I think, are very relevant. That what we see is kind of a fracturing of the internet, or more kind of private purpose networks. So you can take your own traffic, your mission critical traffic, and take it on a private network or a purpose-built network for a certain type of application and have it perform. The discussion around cancer data, for example, is another good example of another parallel network where the internet may well be the on-ramp to a lot of these, but firewalled off and protected into these private networks so they can be secure and they can be scalable and they can be cost effective.
Right.
I think that's a good point. I think the piece that I think is interesting too, I mean, you talk about Facebook and Snapchat and whatever kids are using today. I mean, they are creating their own movies. I mean, even at the age of 9 years old, like my kids are. But that is causing a data distribution problem as well. Data is coming from everywhere. It's not traditionally built, it used to be traditionally built and derived within a data center and managed from within that data center. That's not the case anymore. It's being built and derived from everywhere. So we have to move to an as-a-service model. That is where the world is going to. That's where the ingest of information will be. It's the only way that we can really scale to manage the data and the distribution of data that I think we have out there.
Yeah, just really briefly, one of the things I found interesting in the field is that one of the SaaS companies I spoke with said that last year they had 4 requests for providing a direct connect solution to their SaaS company. And the first quarter of this year, same company, they said they had 40 requests. What that says to me is that there's some reason that the enterprise is having a difficult time getting connected over the internet to that SaaS service, enough so that they would recommend to their SaaS provider, we'd really like to connect to you guys directly. So I think what we're going to be seeing happening in the IT environment increasingly, and what I recommend to our clients that they do, is identify those mission-critical services. What are the services on the internet where if you lost it for an hour during busy or crisis periods, it would adversely affect your business? Identify those mission-critical services as the ones that you want to get directly connected into. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing happening over the next couple of years.
And I think over the last 8 or 10 years, people have become much more comfortable with a service-based model, right? When cloud was first coming to the forefront, it was mainly leveraged by the engineers in the background who didn't want to go through the regular procurement cycle of the big company they work for, so they'd spin up servers and storage on their own credit card and then expense it through the expense system, right? And today, the cloud providers are geared towards supporting the large enterprise opportunities, and as we heard earlier, the banks are fully embracing it. The CIA has fully embraced it. The DoD has fully embraced it. So some very conservative organizations are now fully comfortable embracing a service-based architecture and tying it back to whatever private infrastructure they deem appropriate. And so the dedicated connectivity that Bill mentioned is that much more important than it was even 2 or 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah, so the cloud is here and it is secure, but that leads us into a question about security. Right? We heard Ben talking about the advancements from hackers and all the scary stuff that's out there on the internet. Can each of you talk a little bit about how your businesses are helping customers today improve their security posture and manage their businesses a bit more closely?
Well, sure. I mean, we're a data storage company, but what we do within our server is we give you an ability to encrypt all your data at all times. That is where the world is going in terms of data. You must have it encrypted. Not just that, people like Intel are making it even faster for us to build super fast encryption libraries, but all data will be encrypted at all time. You can't trust it. You saw earlier on somebody said that the problem was that somebody took a USB stick, and that's 80%, I think it was 80% of, or 70% of the enterprises had that problem today. That's where their security problem is. So clearly, all data must be encrypted at all time. You're going to deal with storage systems that have that built in as an expected part of the infrastructure.
I guess I would say that a VPN is a great idea, but it's not good enough. The problem with a VPN is it still goes over the commodity internet. And if you look underneath the covers, what you see in the commodity internet is that there are a whole lot of publicly addressable routers in that path between you and your destination. All those routers can be compromised. There's a black market for compromised routers. All the links in between those routers within a particular network can be captured, mirrored, redirected elsewhere. And between those networks and between you and the destination you want to get to, there are also links that could be captured and compromised. Now, this is what the security analysts call a large attack surface. Lots of places that one can attack. I think the security infrastructure that we need for the mission-critical data is the direct path, the dedicated path that is not shared, where there's no traffic intermingled, and your traffic cannot be impacted by the traffic of others.
Here, the analogy here, it seems to me that, pick it 25 years ago, somebody built these really nice row houses in downtown, and the neighborhood went to hell. That's sort of what's going on with the internet. There's just there are a lot of security exposures now, and it's ubiquitous. I mean, that's it. It's sort of risk is its result of its own success. So what we do is, exactly that. We create private networks. There has been this huge boom. The private connect to the cloud, as a networking company, we thought that was a great idea, and we talked to a lot of cloud companies about it, and they're like, it was fine, a year and a half, 2 years ago. Now it's very much private connection, scalability and performance as well as security. Integrating DDoS protection into our IP services is important because people seem to get their jollies out of that, and that's something you have to protect against. and just providing security applications in our cloud services to help customers manage their own security environment. But it's interesting. It's a technology challenge. It's a social challenge. I literally was sitting at a banking conference the other day. I was sitting next to a guy who was an investment guy, and he said, I don't get it. Why is this security thing such a risk? I mean, I don't understand why this problem can't be solved. And I looked over at his computer, and I said, well, a lot of it's a social issue. It's a people issue. He said, oh, really? I said, what's that mean? I said, yeah. You see that 8-digit code on your computer there? I'm guessing that's your password. He literally had it written out on his keyboard. It's like, this is why security is such a problem. So yeah, we try to enable the infrastructure, but again, there's a whole set of management services that have got to go with it.
And just to add to that, I think that obviously the private network connectivity and the direct connect kind of cloud connectivity and the data center to data center interconnect that's happening because people are more aware now of the potential threat associated with the data in motion between the cloud and the data center, or the data center and the data center. And we're actually at Ciena getting a lot more traction and interest in conversation around encrypting across the private network component that goes between the data centers or from the cloud to the data center. So more and more customers are becoming aware and more concerned about the potential threat. And so they're trying to encrypt the data at rest and encrypt the data in motion as well.
Excellent. So as our final question, and kind of one of the fun ones, in kind of a speed date format, just quick answers. You see how fast technology is changing. You see how much the impact is having on all of our businesses. Can you make a prediction for what you think the next 3 to 5 years might hold, and what might be different than what we're looking at today? Crystal ball time.
I think Twitch is going to be the next ESPN.
Yeah, I do think that emergence of new applications that none of us can think of. Yeah, I remember investing early days of some of the fiber investments that went in the ground. Billions and billions of dollars were spent before any of us had a smartphone. They weren't even envisioned at the time, right? So what that next set of applications are, I don't know. I just predict there'll be lots of them.
Yep.
No, I think the most interesting is we now know that we can store data efficiently, but we've got to have some kind of data services layer that actually allows us to use that data, and it has to become common. And I think you're then going to have these new applications that we'll build. We're only at the very beginning of being able to actually harness the data. Now we know how to store it. Let's go and do something with it, because there's a ton of new applications, new services, new things we can do with it. That's what I hope you're going to see. I think it will happen. I think I'm from Silicon Valley. There's an awful lot of movement in this space right now. But I think you'll see big efforts on a new data services layer, common sets of services, so that we truly can understand and harness data.
I guess my perspective is that a lot of the technology that exists in the industry today is too complicated. We've learned that the enterprise will not embrace a complicated solution. It's just not going to happen. The writing the passwords on the computer, the sort of stuff that your mother or grandmother might do. I think what we need to do as an industry, and what we'll see in the next 3 to 5 years, is an evolution towards the simplicity argument. How can we make this simple so the right and the default action for enterprise will be to do the appropriate step, and make it so it's just dead easy. And I'm thinking here in terms of security methods and configurations. Have the default option simply be point and click and you're connected, or point and click and you get the access to the cloud service that you need, and then to decommission, the same type of thing happens.
And if I could add one quick thing, please. I think what Bill was doing with Nanog is really important. And one of the things that Nanog brought forth a couple years ago was this concept of OpenIX, to create new peering points around the world in places that weren't traditionally considered confluence points for networks. And so the legacy internet was built the way it was built, and there are certain markets that are more relevant than others because of the architecture 20 years ago. But now, as content's becoming more important and localized content's becoming important, you have to have peering in tier 2, tier 3 markets and other markets around the world, other parts of the world that were kind of left out of the initial build of what we now know as the ubiquitous internet, right?
Yes. Gentlemen, thank you for predictions, and thank you for the partnership that we've built together. You guys help Scale Matrix do more for our customers. We appreciate your participation in the Fireside Chat. Let's give them a round of applause.